Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the story about Naruto. What if Naruto become a guardian of the moon? Part 2. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please do support for more awesome content and also hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. And also support the creator of this fanfic. I have created many playlists, check it out in the channel. So let's start the video. A northern wind swept through the peaceful evening streets of Konoha, stirring the blazing red leaves of October. However, this herald of the coming winter went ignored by the increasingly boisterous group within the warm restaurant where Naruto's birthday was being celebrated. Two hands bearing drinks appeared above the crowd as Sakura made her way back from the bar, swaying gracefully through the mass of bodies to where her old teammate was arm wrestling with Lee. The pink-haired Kunoichi stood and watched with amusement as the Taijutsu master, who had thankfully foregone his green spandex jumpsuit for the evening, became increasingly redder in the face as he put all his effort into making the tanned forearm of his opponent budge. Naruto, on the other hand, continued to sip his drink, respectfully delaying the inevitable defeat of his old friend. The table groaned threateningly, straining against their combined strength. Sakura climbed past Naruto to return to her seat at the table, placing one of the drinks in front of Sai, who was watching the match with open-mouthed awe. Incredible! Lee cried out suddenly, his dark eyes sparkling with youthful energy. You are a worthy opponent indeed, Naruto-kun. However, I do not think you should celebrate my defeat just yet. The lights gleamed off Lee's hair as he inhaled deeply, mustering his determination. Just as he opened his mouth, a curtain of thick brown hair slipped down the booth beside him. They looked up to see Neji leaning over from his own booth, looking down at his former teammate critically. Lee, if you are planning to open the inner gates here, I will not hesitate to deal with the proper countermeasures. The Haikyuu prodigy held out one threatening hand, chakra glowing on his fingertips. Naruto nearly spit out his drink, choking with silent laughter. Sakura smiled as she patted him on the back, watching the crestfallen expression on Lee's face. Troublesome. The familiar catchphrase floated in the smoke that rose from the booth behind them, where Shikamaru was sitting with the members of the old Team 10, Ino, and Choji. Shikamaru appeared over the booth, his expression bored and a cigarette hanging from his lips. If you destroy this place, I'm the one who will be getting hell for it. Sorry about that, Shikamaru. Naruto tilted his head up to look at the shadow nin, grinning widely. Guess I'll just end this now. Lee cried out in shock as his bandaged fist hit the wooden table with a loud crack. Shikamaru disappeared with a sigh, muttering, and now he's going to start yelling. Another excellent match, Naruto-kun. Lee yelled, rubbing his fist as he nodded enthusiastically. Youthful rivalry is truly invigorating as punishment for losing 3 consecutive times. I will do 300 laps around the village with my hands. Come on, there's no need for that. Sakura laughed. Neji muttered something inaudible as he sat down once more. Naruto grinned to himself, tuning out Lee's ramblings about the eternal flame of youth as he looked around the room. He had been so busy with his Hokage training and missions for the past few months that he had completely forgotten about his 18th birthday. This, of course, had made it easy for Sakura and Shikamaru to plan a surprise party with all of their comrades. Kakashi sat at the bar with Guy, Haruka, and Yamato, their cheeks becoming redder as the evening went on and the number of sake bottles in front of them multiplied. Tsunade was leaning haphazardly to the side as she drunkenly complained about the amount of paperwork she had to anyone who would listen. Kiba was religiously focused on removing Shino's sunglasses, which had resulted in an interesting scuffle. Akamaru and Hinata chose to ignore this display. The large hound's head rested on Hinata's lap as she scratched behind his ears. These were the people for whom Naruto had fought. This was the peace that he had longed for. As Sakura leaned against his side while she spoke to Lee and Sai, Naruto inhaled deeply with an overwhelming sense of happiness. There's only one thing missing. The blonde thought, his eyes straying out the window towards the bright, rising moon. Ever since the last time he had seen Sasuke, Naruto's mind had continuously slipped back to the memory of Sasuke's eyes, usually so coldly detached, sparking to life. The memory of that sensual gaze kept pulling Naruto's imagination into dangerous places. It had gotten to the point where Sasuke haunted Naruto's dreams, leading him through the darkness until Naruto found himself waking with a start. Naruto had learned to accept a desire that coursed through him. There was no use fighting it. He downed the rest of his drink, sliding out of the booth and stretching grandly. Pulling his sage cloak over his Jounin vest, he smiled down at his friends. "I'll be back in a bit," he said, as he slotted his hands into his pockets. "I just need to get a bit of air, you know?" Without waiting for a response, he turned on his heel and headed for the door. A path cleared for him through the crowd, his resonating aura surging on ahead of him. The air in his wake seemed charged with static energy, lingering around the people who had parted ways to let him pass. Sai placed his cup down gently, his dark eyes slipping sideways to take in Sakura's profile. "You don't suppose he's going to go see him, do you?" he asked, quietly enough that the still rambling Lee didn't hear him. The medical ninja shut her aqua green eyes, smiling sadly. "I have no doubt." The air within the halls of the ninja prison was chilled and stagnant as Naruto passed through them, his red cloak billowing slowly behind him. It grew increasingly more silent as he made his way to the lowest level of the prison, where Sasuke was being held. As he reached the bottom of the same steps he had descended months ago, the guards on duty jumped to attention. "Well, if it isn't Uzumaki-sensei." Naruto glanced up, smiling when he recognized the guard. "It's been a while." The older man nodded, the lights from the lanterns gleaming off his highlight. "I thought we would be seeing you quite often, if I may be honest." "Yeah, well," Naruto rubbed his head uncomfortably. "I've been really busy lately." "Of course," the guard said with a knowing smile, turning to open the door. He allowed Naruto to pass, sealing the door securely behind him. The young guard who was his partner for the evening stuttered in shock. "Wait, sir, he didn't have a visitor's pass, and how did he even get in here late at night? Not to mention that it's basic protocol for visitors of high-security prisoners to be escorted by 2 or more guards." The other guard laughed loudly, leaning back against a wall. "I'm glad you know your stuff, kid, but that guy's an exception. You can't really stand here and ask the one and only Naruto Uzumaki-sensei for a visitor's pass, can you?" Eyes flying wide with shock, the young ninja looked over his shoulder as if he would be able to see through the thick metal door. "That was Naruto-sensei?" His cheeks flushed a deep shade of red as he looked at his partner. "Do you think he'll give me his autograph?" Naruto looked over his shoulder curiously as laughter echoed faintly behind him. He shook his head, smiling, as he muttered, "At least those guys don't get bored down here." He continued to retrace the path he had taken months ago, the ball of nerves in his stomach growing larger with every step. Finally, he came to a halt outside Sasuke's dark cell, smiling meekly as he glanced down at his feet. "I thought I told you not to come here, Naruto," came Sasuke's deep, silken voice. "Sorry," the sage said, his hands fisting tightly within his pockets. His heart was racing, his mind replaying the moment of intensity that had rattled the air between them the last time he was here. He heard a deep sigh and then the sound of footsteps as Sasuke made his way into the light. He looked like the apparition of a ghost, paler than moonlight with eyes of gleaming black, striking and beautiful. "Don't apologize about it now, idiot." He stopped when he was a foot away from the bars of his cell, crossing his arms across his chest. "Any specific reason why you're here?" Naruto shook his head, slipping a hand out of his pocket to rest it on his stomach. Sasuke's eyes flicked down to that hand, whitening when they noticed the green vest. "They've made you a jounin?" he asked, trying his best not to sound impressed. He got the feeling that he hadn't fooled the blonde, however, as a secret smirk found its way to Naruto's lips. "Yeah, a few months ago now. It was an honorary promotion, or something like that." "Don't be too flattered, Dobe," Sasuke said, turning his face away. "They probably just couldn't stand the idea of a genin becoming Hokage." Naruto laughed softly. "I won't say that's not a possibility." The sound of that laugh sent a shiver up Sasuke's spine. His fists tightened, his face set in a disinterested mask as he told himself, "It's not like that. I do not want Naruto that way. It's just because I've been alone for so long." Naruto finally looked up, the motion drawing Sasuke's eyes. He raised one of his dark eyebrows, smirking, as he studied the flush in Naruto's cheeks. "Have you been out drinking, Dobe?" Naruto smiled like a little kid caught red-handed. He nodded, the hand that had been resting on his stomach now pounding against it, as a fist. "Did you know that Kurama's lightweight? Can't handle his alcohol at all." "Hey, knock it off," Sasuke said exasperatedly, stepping forward to grab Naruto's fist through the bars. "You'll make yourself puke." As soon as their skin made contact, Sasuke could sense Naruto's entire body stiffening. Immediately, the space between them sparked with tension. Sasuke glanced up, freezing when his eyes met with Naruto's own vividly blue ones. Sasuke was struck, yet again, by how attractive Naruto had become, by how attracted he was to the blonde. He found himself staring at Naruto's lips, wondering if the blonde had ever kissed anyone before. Why? He asked himself, horrified. For a moment, they simply stood in silence, but then Sasuke sighed, studying the scarred fist held in his pale hand. Without knowing why, he rubbed his thumb over Naruto's knuckles, reveling in the warmth of his skin. When he spoke, his voice came out in a rough whisper, raw with emotion. "Why did you come here, Naruto?" "I don't know." The blonde replied, his voice a low, gravelly hum. He inhaled deeply, making an obvious effort to relax himself. He leaned forward until the side of his forehead rested against one of the bars, the light from the lanterns gleaming in his depthless eyes. "It's my birthday today. I really wanted to see you." His birthday? Sasuke thought, eyes widening. "I didn't realize I'd been in here for so long already." "Well, happy birthday then, Dobe," he said, still looking down. "Sorry, but I don't have a gift prepared at the moment." Naruto laughed as he reached up and, after a moment of breathless hesitation, gently lifted Sasuke's chin. His cheeks were bright red when he whispered, "Just being with you is enough." The ache that had been growing duller over the past several weeks suddenly returned with a vengeance, chasing heat from Sasuke's stomach straight up into his cheeks. Sasuke was shocked to discover that he didn't mind Naruto touching him this way, in fact he enjoyed it. He could feel his heart beating in his throat, making it difficult to breathe, as a sudden and intense desire filled him. Sasuke's mind was, without warning, filled with images of himself reaching for Naruto, touching him, kissing him, and tasting him on his tongue. "Don't go there," Sasuke warned himself. "You're probably reading the situation wrong. Naruto's always been grabby. If he rejects you." Despite his own warning, Sasuke let his eyes drift shut as Naruto's calloused fingers softly traced his jawline before slipping into his smooth, black hair. The strands slipped through his warm fingers as fluidly as water. "Your hair's grown," he said softly. "It looks nice on you." "Naruto." Sasuke frowned, the corners of his mouth quivering as his voice came out in a broken whisper. "Why did you come, Naruto?" Unable to resist the intensity of his need any longer, Sasuke took a deep, shaking breath against the nerves writhing in his stomach. He stepped forward until his chest was against the bars of his cell, his nose brushing against Naruto's. He stopped just before their lips met, hesitating, terrified that Naruto would back away from him. For the briefest moment their gazes meshed, and Sasuke thought he saw something flash in Naruto's eyes, like a burning ember. Desire. Naruto's hand slid around to the back of Sasuke's head, pulling him forward. At first, their lips met in a soft, questioning brush. They lingered nervously, neither one of them confident enough to jump into this moment of vulnerability. But, as pain radiated from Sasuke's chest, he abandoned his fear and reached up to roughly grasp the spiky strands of Naruto's hair. "Naruto, please," he whispered before crushing their lips together. Heat exploded between them, churning up a tension that rushed into Sasuke's limbs and made his skin tingle. His heart leapt, butterflies fluttering in his stomach as he realized how right this felt and how desperately he needed it. "How long have I been repressing this?" Sasuke wondered. Naruto responded enthusiastically, leaning forward until he was completely pressed against the bars as he tilted Sasuke's face upwards. Sasuke felt himself being overwhelmed by the intense heat that radiated from his childhood friend. He released his grip on Naruto's hand, grabbing onto his vest instead. He nipped at the blonde's lower lip sharply, blushing when he felt Naruto's mouth smiling against his own. Naruto's tongue slipped over his lips fluidly, teasing him with the taste of sake and something sweet that Sasuke couldn't identify. In that moment, Sasuke felt himself disconnected from the world, from the pain and the uncertainty, and all that mattered was the sensation of Naruto's full lips moving against his. At that moment, Naruto was the only thing that mattered. Succumbing to his own desire, Sasuke allowed Naruto to dominate the kiss, using the opportunity to greedily explore the Jinchuriki's body with his hands. Every ounce of baby fat had melted away from Naruto's lean body, his back a defined S-curve as he bent slightly to meet Sasuke's lips. If it weren't for the cold bars, their bodies would have been pressed flush together. Naruto smoothed his hands down Sasuke's sides, resting his hands on narrow angular hips. Using his height and the cool press of the bars to his advantage, Naruto kept his lips just out of Sasuke's reach, whispering, "Sasuke, are you sure this is okay? We can stop." "Stop?" Sasuke thought, his eyebrow arching. His heart was pounding so loudly in his ears that it took him a moment to collect his thoughts. But when his scattered brain had sorted itself out, realization hit Sasuke like a tidal wave. Holy shit. Stop, stop. Yeah, Sasuke muttered coldly, averting his gaze. We need to stop. This is insane. Naruto mused, his hands stroking back up to Sasuke's hair. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm insane, because I sure as hell don't want to stop. Sasuke swallowed his immediate response, closing his eyes as he tried to control the frantic beating of his heart. After a few seconds, he managed to shake his head. Allow me some dignity, he whispered, reaching out to grip one of the cell bars pointedly. I want us to be on equal ground. Although Naruto looked disappointed, he nodded. I understand. He said, pulling himself away from Sasuke's sensitive body. But not far enough away that he couldn't recapture Sasuke's lips. His warm, rough hand rested gently on Sasuke's neck as he kissed him slowly. His mouth was gentle, sensual. Sasuke felt his frantic heartbeat slowing, his hands coasting over Naruto's body lightly. Finally, they broke apart, cheeks red, as their eyes met. Naruto smiled warmly, cradling Sasuke's face in his hands. I know that, technically, this is our third kiss, but, he leaned forward, laying a soft kiss upon Sasuke's lips. Let's say that one is the first. He leaned forward again, his lips brushing from one cheek to the other, then back to Sasuke's mouth. And that one can be the second. He whispered before kissing Sasuke once more. And that one can be the third. Sasuke turned his face away, hiding his blush behind the fall of his hair. You're embarrassing, idiot blonde. Good. Naruto muttered with a grin. He pulled back, hands clinging to the bars. Sasuke followed his example, quickly dropping his hands as he realized how tight his grip on Naruto was. Heavy silence fell, only their breathing and the echo of dripping water disturbing it. Not entirely sure what he should say after such an intense display of emotion, not to mention a confusingly passionate kiss, Naruto stared at Sasuke's face and waited for him to speak first. It was a long time before he complied. You'd better get going. Sasuke said softly, looking down so Naruto wouldn't be able to see the pain in his eyes. You ditched your birthday party to come see me, right? Busted, Naruto said, taking a step back. The silence that followed was excruciating, ringing with the words neither of them would say. Sasuke scrambled to reconstruct his protective walls, retreating into the darkness of his cell. When his back hit the wall he slid down, hiding his face in his hands. But even at this distance, Naruto's warmth was burning through his skin and electrifying his nerves, sending currents sharper than lightning straight into his chest. When Naruto spoke again, his deep voice was shaking. I know this is probably the last thing you want to hear right now, but I miss you. Every day, I miss you. And I swear, I'll do anything I can to get you out of here. After a while, he tore himself away from the bars, turning to leave. That's when the voice that haunted so many of Naruto's memories came drifting from the dark, soft, and weaving as the shadows that concealed its source. Thank you, Naruto. Happy birthday. The party had long since ended, but Naruto found himself prowling the quiet streets of Konoha like an animal patrolling the borders of its cage. Restlessness courses through his limbs, fueling his steps, as he warred with his desire to run beyond the walls of the village, race through the trees, and disappear into the dark. Sasuke's taste still lingered on his tongue, his scent still clung to his clothing, and Naruto felt his sanity slipping every time he inhaled that scent. Naruto had always been known for his unpredictability, his ability to go above and beyond what was thought possible. He was whimsical and followed his gut and his desire with a single-minded recklessness. This was the norm for the young ninja, who lived every day with awe-inspiring passion. But in this moment, his entire being was focused on a singular desire to return to the arms of a certain man, pale and beautiful and cloaked in darkness, who was even now waiting patiently below the earth. Damn it. Naruto muttered, rubbing at his head in irritation. Kurama, who was recovering from the few festive drinks they had earlier consumed, lifted his head from his paws and growled. I know you're busy swooning like a schoolgirl, Naruto, but someone's been trailing you for a few minutes now. He said, baring his impressive set of teeth as he looked in the direction of the foreign chakra. The blonde frowned, his eyebrow twitching in annoyance. Yeah, thanks, I've already noticed him. I'm really not in the mood for this right now, you know? Naruto's internal dialogue with his monster tenant was interrupted by a loud, growling voice. Naruto. Kiba appeared from around the corner, his sharp animal eyes flashing and nostrils flaring. His shoulders were high and stiff, as if he were raising his hackles, and Naruto immediately recognized his alpha male mode. The dog ninja stormed over, his leather jacket crackling, as he pulled his hands out of his pockets. The Jinchuriki sighed, adopting an attitude of calm with effort. "Hey, Kiba. Where's Akamaru?" It was odd seeing Kiba without his giant white canine. Kiba seemed to feel out of sorts as he shifted defensively in response to Naruto's comment. "I sent him with Hinata to make sure she got home safely. Now, listen up, Naruto, because it's Hinata that I came here to talk about." He stabbed a long-nailed finger in Naruto's direction, his voice vicious and accusing. "Why haven't you acknowledged her yet? She finally confessed to you, didn't she? Not only that, but she put her life on the line to protect you when Pain had you pinned. I think that she deserves a damn answer from you, at the very least. You might be some big shot now, Naruto, but don't you dare forget about your comrades." Naruto blinked in shock. With everything that had happened since his fight with Pain, Hinata's dramatic confession had somehow slipped his mind. He suddenly felt despicably inconsiderate, a sharp pang of guilt flaring up in his chest. "Hinata," he muttered, looking at the ground. The image of her pale, lavender-hued eyes danced in his memory. The softly spoken kunoichi was, undoubtedly, beautiful and sweet. Her quiet determination and grace added to her charm, and she was definitely a valuable shinobi and comrade. Naruto had acknowledged her abilities on several occasions, and he appreciated her company. However, when he thought of love, it was not her face that appeared in his mind. "I'm sorry, Kiba," he finally said, looking up to level the jumpy dog nin with a sincere gaze. "I'm sorry if it seems like I've been neglecting my friends lately. I'll try to do better. And if Hinata has been suffering, then I'm sorry about that too. I know how much you care about her, so I don't really blame you if you hate me right about now, you know?" He paused to inhale deeply, slotting his hands into his pockets and glancing towards the shadowy forms of the Hokage's figureheads. "I guess I'm not being fair at all, am I? Hinata deserves better. I'll be sure to talk to her as soon as possible." Kiba appeared shocked by his response. But eventually, he growled under his breath, running a hand through his wild hair. "Yeah, make sure you do, bastard." He turned sharply on his heel, storming away along the quiet street. Naruto stood and watched him leave, smiling despite himself. "Maybe if I turn Hinata down, Kiba will finally make a move on her." He mused out loud, laughing softly at the thought. Yeah, you're practically Cupid, kid." Kurama interjected sarcastically. "Now go home and get some sleep. You have a lesson with Kakashi tomorrow, and I won't be able to give you any hints because of that blasted Sharingan. Try not to make us look stupid." "No worries," Naruto responded as he turned, making his way home. "I can guarantee you that Kakashi-sensei will be hungover tomorrow. The training session will be a breeze." The demon fox nodded solemnly, ears flat, as he said, "This alcohol that you humans drink is powerful, indeed." Loud, honey-rich laughter echoed through the silent streets long after Naruto had disappeared for the night, climbing into his bed while he continued to mock the low alcohol tolerance of the feared, legendary nine-tailed fox of Konoha. Morning found Naruto standing in the Hokage's office, waiting patiently for the extremely hungover Tsunade to collect herself. One of God's hands clung tightly to a cup of bitter black coffee, while the other protected her eyes from the offensive morning sun. Shizune smiled nervously as she placed a messenger scroll in front of her, keeping her voice low as she said, "This is the document you asked for, ma'am." Tsunade groaned, leaning forward to take a swig of her coffee before leveling Naruto with a dark look. "First of all, I should say happy birthday once more. I hope you enjoyed your party, Naruto." The blonde laughed nervously. Yeah, thanks Granny." The Hokage nodded, taking another huge drink from her cup. She sighed as she swallowed the hot beverage, setting the cup down to unroll the scroll her attendant had placed before her. "Now, down to business," she began, as her eyes traced over the document in her hands. "We received this message from the Hidden Cloud village late last night. It seems like a faction, similar to the one that appeared in the Hidden Rain village, has been making themselves known within the cloud." Naruto frowned, stepping forward to accept the scroll from Tsunade. "You mean that group from the Hidden Rain that was anti-alliance, or whatever?" "Yes, that's the one," Tsunade said. "However, according to Raikage, many of the confirmed members of this group have caused a fuss in the past. He suspects that they're jumping on any opportunity to create unrest." It seems that, a few years ago, they tried to replace Raikage with one of their own pawns. Naruto shook his head. So, what's the deal? Are they telling me to come and fix it, like I did in the Hidden Rain? No, not this time. Tsunade replied, pointing towards the scroll in Naruto's hand. They think that they can handle this themselves. Though they may request your support at any time, so be prepared. Naruto closed the scroll, placing it down on Tsunade's new desk. I'm surprised they told us if they don't need me to head out there immediately. About that, Tsunade said, glancing sideways at Shizune. The cage agreed to share all information about these rising factions and protesting groups, since it seems that they're mostly people stuck in the old world, where a Jinchuriki would never be allowed to rise to such an important position. It's only fair that you should be fully aware of them, since it's likely that you will become a target. Naruto processed this in silence for a while, only to smirk when Kurama snorted with laughter, his ears flicking back against his head. Us, targeted by a group of whiny old politicians? This should be good, hey Naruto? Naruto found himself laughing too, glancing at the confused expressions of the two women before him. Thanks for keeping me informed, Granny. But I'm not really worried about them attacking me. Just tell me when the other villages need my help sorting things out. Tsunade found herself smiling. Fine. She sighed, shaking her head. Now, get out of my hair. You have a lesson with Kakashi soon, right? Yes, ma'am. Jinchuriki said, smiling to himself as he bowed his head. He turned and left the office, Kurama's monologue about the stupidity of humans continuing uninterrupted as Naruto made his way out to the street. The heavy fog clung to the chilled morning air, dew sparkling on the fiery autumn leaves. As Naruto passed through the streets of his beloved village, it began to awaken for the new day. Silently upon the rooftops, the village's shinobi were on the move, their various assignments calling them away from their warm beds. Paperboys scampered through the streets, eyeing Naruto with awed and fearful recognition. Shopkeepers and tea-house owners prepared for the day's business, opening their doors to the sunlit morning. Naruto smiled to himself, the warmth blooming within his chest, unrelated to the blazing chakra of the demon fox, who had worked himself into a frenzy now. The blonde pointedly ignored his continuing rant, knowing from experience that it was best to let Kurama tire himself out. As he turned a corner in the road, a familiar sheet of midnight hair caught his eye. Immediately, warmth found Naruto's whiskered cheeks, and the smile fell from his face. Hinata. Kurama stopped mid-sentence, sniffing at the familiar chakra. After a moment, his mouth pulled up in an enormous, fanged grin. His tone oozing with satisfaction, as he said, that was sooner than expected. I hope you've got some good lines prepared. Naruto felt his eyebrow twitch in irritation. Deciding to save his retort for another time, the blonde forced a smile back onto his face, calling out to the timid Kunoichi. Morning, Hinata. The Hyuga heiress whipped around to face him, her face an alarming shade of red and her eyes wide open in surprise. She immediately clung to the front of her violet sweatshirt, knees meeting in nervousness as she lowered her gaze. So damn cute. Naruto thought, sighing inwardly at the realization that he would be the one responsible for hurting such a delicate creature. Then Naruto-kun. Hinata stuttered, glancing up from the fall of her bangs. I didn't expect to see you here some early in the morning. Yeah, I had some things to talk about with Granny before heading out to train with Kakashi-sensei. Naruto explained, rubbing at his spiky locks. Hinata nodded, suddenly becoming very serious. Of course, Naruto-kun is a very important person now. Even though it was your birthday only yesterday, you've already resumed fulfilling your responsibilities. Naruto blinked a few times in surprise before blushing, laughing despite himself. Well, I'm a ninja of the leaf, you know. It's my duty to be responsible. Hinata's eyes glistened as she smiled, her face becoming an impossibly deeper shade of red. A slight breeze began to pick up, the currents of northern air playing with the abundant fabric of Naruto's red cloak and the smooth ends of Hinata's hair. The heavy weight settled in the pit of Naruto's stomach as he muttered to himself, responsible, huh? He stepped forward quickly, closing the distance between them so he could place one warm hand upon the Kunoichi's shoulder. Please listen, Hinata. I know I've done something terrible to you by not responding to your confession for so long. You can thank Kiba for knocking some sense into me. I want you to know that I'm sorry. So sorry. I never meant to disrespect you like that. And I want to say thank you. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for saving me. And lastly, Thank you for loving me when everyone else refused to see me as anything other than a nuisance. Thank you, Hinata. I'm in your debt." Naruto let his hand drop, sky blue eyes never leaving pale lavender ones, as he inhaled deeply, settling his nerves. Hinata stared in open-mouthed shock, her face now completely drained of color. "Please don't faint." Naruto thought warily, before continuing his speech. "Hinata, you deserve better than a man who's kept you waiting for so long." The seconds ticked by into minutes, as Hinata continued to stare up at him in shock. Then finally, gradually, a beautiful, sad smile found its way to her lips. A slight blush returned to her cheeks as twin tears fell from each eye. Her voice did not shake as she spoke, and to Naruto's shock and immense joy, she looked directly into his eyes. "If anything, Naruto-kun, I am in your debt. You have saved me in more ways than one, on so many different occasions. You helped me find my Nindo. You helped me find my courage. Thank you for acknowledging me now and in the past. You've changed me, Naruto-kun. You've changed this entire village, no, this entire ninja world. It's true that I've loved you for a long time, but I think I'll be happy just being able to stay by your side as a comrade and a friend. I won't be sad, Naruto-kun, so please don't worry about me." A few more delicate tears fell from her pale eyes, and, as she reached up to wipe them with her sleeve, Naruto Uzumaki started laughing. His face beat red, Naruto leaned back and laughed with joy. Then, just as suddenly as he had begun to laugh, he pulled Hinata into a strong embrace, filled with all the warmth that spilled from his heart like the tears from her eyes. "Naruto-kun?" Hinata whispered breathlessly, her tone making it quite clear that she was concerned for his health. "Don't ever stop doing that," Naruto said as he pulled back, placing a hand on top of her head. "I want to see you speaking your mind like that all the time. You are a powerful kunoichi and a kind-hearted person. Hinata, you're one of my beloved comrades, whom I treasure above all else. Don't you ever forget that, and don't ever, ever, look down on anyone." Hinata positively beamed. Fresh tears fell from her eyes as she laughed, nodding vigorously. "Yes," she cried, reaching up to take Naruto's hand between both of her own. They stood like that for a while, simply laughing, until people began to gather at the ends of the street. Suddenly realizing that they were close to the Hikage residence, Naruto deemed it wise to take his leave before the cold, protective eyes of Niji Hikage were boring a hole in the back of his head. Gently, he pulled his hand away. Smiling down once again, he declared in his booming, gravelly voice, "A fine lady of the Hikage clan shouldn't be wasting her time on a loser like me, anyways." After flashing a devilish grin, Naruto vanished in a gust of wind. Hinata laughed again, holding down her hair until the sudden gale subsided. "I know, Naruto-kun," Hinata thought as she activated her Byakugan, watching his chakra as he moved away at a startling pace, barely even a blur in her vision. "I know that you have someone else that you love. And you know, I don't really mind. Somehow, I always felt like I had no right to love you. No right to try and tie you down. That's because, Naruto-kun, you've always been just like the wind." Her Byakugan faded as she turned, wiping her eyes as she broke into a jog, heading towards the location where her team was meeting for an early morning training session. Kiba jumped up as she came into view, for a moment sighing with relief until he picked up on Naruto's scent. Hinata continued to smile as he gripped her arms tightly, concerned about finding purchase on his features as he began to console her. "Yes, you're just like the wind, everywhere and nowhere at exactly the same time. You need someone who stirs you. And you've found that person, haven't you, Naruto-kun?" When Naruto's feet hit the ground a few seconds later, he was already many kilometers away. Kakashi had called him out to the clearing where he had done a large portion of his training in the past, and yet, as Naruto looked around, Kakashi was nowhere to be found. "Weird," Naruto muttered, "I definitely felt his chakra a second ago." In fact, the sage thought as he slipped into a defensive position, his eyes closing. His chakra felt a little too strong. Usually, even when he's in the village, Kakashi-sensei conceals most of his presence. Was he attacked? No, that can't be. There aren't any signs of a fight around here. In that case, Naruto said, his eyes yellow as they flashed open. This is a trap, and you're not alone. He jumped into the air as 1,000 daggers of wood erupted from the ground, twisting into thick columns as they followed his movements like demented snakes. Making the hand sign for his trademark jutsu, Naruto created a dozen clones, each of them working quickly to create the technique of his own invention, Rasen Shuriken. Now! Naruto cried. At his command, his clones threw their chakra weapons in unison towards the twisting forest that was rocketing towards them. The giant branches were shattered in an explosion of wood splinters and dust. Kakashi, who was watching from behind a nearby tree with a rather bored expression, jumped in surprise when he realized that not only the clones, but the original Naruto, as well, had disappeared. He peered through the dust and falling debris, stepping forward as two figures slowly appeared. As the last splinters of wood clattered to the ground, Kakashi found himself gazing in amusement at Naruto, who held his former team captain, Yamato, at the point of his kunai. The captain held his hands up in surrender, laughing nervously as sweat dripped down from his temple. When he noticed Kakashi standing before them, Yamato blushed. I was so easily defeated, even after I had gained power from being fused with the first Hokage's cells once again. Forgive me, senpai. Kakashi waved off his apology while Naruto laughed, putting his weapon away before hauling the captain out from the ground with one arm. Listen up, Naruto. The silver-haired ninja said, cocking a hip as he slotted his gloved hands into his pockets. I woke up with a screaming headache today, thanks to your little party last night. So I'm not really in the mood for a formal lesson, since trying to teach you always gives me a headache anyways. Don't blame me. You drank that much all on your own, sensei. Naruto grumbled. Yamato snorted. Kakashi sighed. Anyways, Naruto, that's why I asked Yamato to come and help me out. We'll have an all-out battle today. But you'll be at a disadvantage. You are not to use either your sage powers or the Kyuubi's chakra. This is a test to see how well your lessons with Shikamaru, Tsunade, and myself have paid off. Let's begin. Kakashi and Yamato both froze as Naruto's hand flew up to halt them. His yellow sage eyes focused on something unseen in the distance, a deep frown forming on his face. What is it, Naruto? Yamato asked, glancing nervously at Kakashi. Do you sense something? He nodded. There's a lot of unusual movement in the village, and I can't figure out why. Everyone seems to be heading towards the same place. His voice faded away as his eyes shot wide open. Naruto's raised hand suddenly balled into a fist as he whispered, those bastards. Those goddamn sneaky bastards. Naruto? Kakashi urged, stepping forward cautiously, prepared to restrain his student. Jinchuriki's head whipped around, his eyes blazing with terrible anger. His explanation came in the form of a single word, which reached their ears after Naruto had already vanished. Sasuke? There were rough, unfamiliar hands guiding him through what seemed like an endless maze of silent hallways. No one spoke a single word, only the sound of their footsteps and the rattling of Sasuke's chains breaking the silence. They had tied a black blindfold tightly around Sasuke's head as a precaution against the Sharingan, even though his chakra was sealed so tightly that he didn't have enough power to activate it. The hands on his arms tightened as they guided him around another corner. Forget about your pride. Sasuke smiled faintly, content on distracting himself by thinking about Naruto until he sensed the presence of a large group of people. For the first time since he had been retrieved from his cell, Sasuke spoke. Hold it, what's going on? It's your trial, Uchiha. Didn't anyone tell you? Sasuke frowned, silent, as they stopped, and someone formed a hand sign to open the sealed door. Finally, the raven-haired ninja shook his head. Oh, the guard replied, sounding entirely unremorseful. Well, I guess it was really last minute. Voices reached their ears as soon as the door opened. They made their way down another short passage until they stood before a second door. This one was guarded by two ninja, who both made blood seals to remove the heavy metal barrier that blocked their way. The noise hit them like a tidal wave. Even with his seriously diminished senses, Sasuke knew there were hundreds of bodies crammed into the courtroom, many of which possessed chakras that he recognized. He realized, however, as they guided him to the defendant's chair and began to chain him down, that there was one chakra that he couldn't sense at all. Where are you? Once they had finished securing him, the guards moved away. His blindfold remained in place, and Sasuke found himself relieved. It was cowardly, but he was glad that he wouldn't have to face a room full of cold, hateful glares. The loud buzz of voices faded almost immediately when the sharp tapping of wood on wood resounded through the room. A voice, which Sasuke identified as belonging to one of the elders, called the court to order. As soon as Sasuke realized who the owner of the voice was, a cold and familiar darkness began creeping out from the deepest crevices of his heart. Where are you, Naruto? The judge wasted no time in calling the court to order. We are gathered here today to determine the fate of the rogue ninja, Sasuke Uchiha, who has gained the right to a trial only through the efforts of our dear Hokage. His charges are as follows: military defection from Konoha, fraternization with rogue ninja, several accounts of murder, attacking the cage in a neutral country, and fraternization with an enemy organization. The defendant pleads guilty to these charges. I open the trial to the council and the jury. Hold on for just 1 minute. Came the voice of an old woman. Do not forget that this child infiltrated the village of the Cloud, killing several of their shinobi and causing the brother of the Raikage, the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki, to disappear. I believe it should also be mentioned that he and his group took the lives of many of the samurai guards during the cage summit. One man called out, his booming voice echoing around the chamber. The buzzing of voices rose in a crescendo, the crowd joining in on the declaration of crimes. He has attacked his fellow ninja of the Leaf. All the Uchihas are traitors. He's part of the conspiracy. He was in it with Madara from the beginning. The judge slammed down his hammer, but the courtroom would not be calmed. In the balcony overlooking the courtroom, members of the Konoha 11 watched in utter silence. Ino and Sakura watched with blank expressions, only the tightness of their laced fingers giving away their emotions. Hinata sat beside them with her hands covering her mouth, tears rolling down her cheeks as she shook her head. Sai stood behind them with Shino, his Anbu mask in place, and his arms folded rigidly over his chest. Lee and Tenten entered hurriedly, still cloaked in a sheen of sweat from their training session. Shikamaru, Kiba, and Niji sat in the front row, leaning on the railing as they watched with rapture. Even Choji was sobered by the gravity of their mood, his large hand resting on one's shoulder gently. Where the hell is Naruto? Kiba suddenly muttered under his breath. Shouldn't he be here by now? Behind him, his comrades nodded silently. Shikamaru rubbed at his temple, his sharp eyes following everything that was happening below. I have no idea. But one thing's for sure, things really aren't looking good for Sasuke unless Naruto shows up. The minutes ticked by, and the amount of noise continued to grow. Irritation hung heavily around the shinobi on the balcony, like an ominous dark aura. Eventually, Sakura started visibly shaking, muttering a single name under her breath like a summoning mantra. Naruto. 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 Where are you? A cloud of chakra smoke exploded around the chair where Sasuke was chained. A deathly silence fell over the room as the smoke slowly cleared and a familiar, brightly colored figure came into view. Naruto was perched atop the back of the wooden chair, one arm resting on his raised knee while the other adjusted his headband. Sorry I'm late, he said in a forcibly calm tone. My invitation must have gotten lost in the mail. A sigh of relieved laughter broke the silence before the judge slammed his hands down. Naruto-sama, what is the meaning of this? How did you even get in? The look Jinchuriki shot at the judge was potent enough to silence him. He turned to level the council, the jury, and the audience with the exact same glare. His friends watched the collective recoil of those who had been so bold only seconds before with satisfied smirks from their seats on the balcony. Sakura sighed softly, slumping forward in relief. I could ask you all the exact same thing. Naruto's voice cut into them, sharp and powerful. He jumped down from his perch, folding his muscular arms over his chest. Last I checked, this was a trial for Sasuke Uchiha, not for the entire Uchiha clan. Sasuke is as much a victim of the choices made by his clan as we are. Don't use him as an outlet for your anger against their betrayal. And keep your speculations and accusations out of this. He's committed enough crimes without you inventing some for him. Also, Naruto continued, this time in a softer tone. You all know that Sasuke doesn't even have enough chakra to activate his Sharingan, let alone use it. Allow the man some dignity, would you? A shiver ran down Sasuke's spine as Naruto's surprisingly gentle hands slipped into his hair, untying the tight blindfold. By the time Sasuke opened his eyes, the blonde had already turned his back to him, the thin strip of cloth dangling from his clenched fist. Sasuke was shocked by how much this simple gesture stung him. Look at me, idiot. Tsunade-sama. The judge cried out, pointing his mallet in the direction of the Hokage. I was told that Naruto Uzumaki-sama had been summoned to the Cloud Village. Godame folded her arms, leaning back in her chair. Is that so? She muttered. I must have forgotten to tell him about that. Tsunade smirked as she lifted her lashes to reveal deep, amber eyes. What I would like to know, Naruto, is how you got in here. The barriers around this courthouse should make it impenetrable to any jutsu. Naruto blinked in surprise. Oh, that? I've been learning some of my dad's jutsu. like his teleportation jutsu and stuff. I put one of the seals on Sasuke after he'd been captured, so I would be able to go to his exact location if he ever escaped, you know. Sasuke stared at the back of Naruto's head in disbelief. When did he put one of the landmark seals on me? He wondered. The answer came to him in a flash of heated memory. He could almost feel warm fingers ghosting along the back of his neck as he realized, I didn't even notice. Damn. Listen. Naruto said, once again adopting a tone of authority. My most trusted comrades, those who will be the future of Konoha, are watching this trial. If they think the trial is in any way biased or unfair, I will not hesitate to act. One of the council members, the son of a lord, leaned forward with a smirk. But Uzumaki-sama, now that you have arrived, it is impossible for a fair trial to occur. The jury will doubtless be influenced by your presence. Also, is it not fair to assume that, if a verdict which is not in your favor is reached, you will act regardless? Naruto sighed. I knew someone would say that. Think about it. If I had no intention of letting Sasuke get punished for his crimes, why would I bring him here in the first place, you know? But I can see your point. I'll leave. I'm just a clone, anyways. As the clone raised his hands to form the sign that would trigger his disappearance, a low voice cut into the silence. Hey, Naruto. The Uzumaki clone turned his face towards Sasuke, though he kept his focus towards the audience. His voice was soft when he spoke. Just tell the truth, Sasuke. That's all you can do, and I think that's enough. He redirected his voice to the entire room. I stand behind everything Sasuke says. And, if you need me, I'll speak on his behalf, you know? With that, the clone vanished. Immediately, the courtroom was buzzing with excited voices. However, on the balcony, a shocked silence filled the air. It was Kiba who broke it first. Oi, Shikamaru. Is he really just going to leave and just trust these guys to do the right thing? Shikamaru shook his head. Naruto understands the difficulty of the situation he's in. Sasuke has to fight for his freedom on his own. But he paused here to pull a small slip of paper out of his vest pocket, reaching past Neji to place it on an empty seat. He'll be right back, actually. As if on cue, another Naruto clone appeared in the seat beside Neji. In an attempt to mask his presence, the original had fed the smallest amount of chakra possible into the clone so that its form occasionally wavered. The clone leaned forward, blue eyes intently focused on the scene below them. Hey, Naruto, Shikamaru whispered, where's the original? The clone didn't even spare him a glance. With the fourth. When Shikamaru looked at Neji questioningly, the Hika activated his Byakugan. After a moment of searching, he nodded. Yes, it's as I thought. The original Naruto is standing on top of the fourth Hokage's figurehead with Kakashi-sensei and Captain Yamato. The rapping of the judge's mallet called their attention. He furrowed his brow, obviously displeased with the turn that things had taken. The defendant will now take the stand. Sasuke Uchiha, let us hear why you deserve our pardon. Sasuke slowly lifted his head, his long bangs framing his bone-ash face. Finally, he deigned to level the assembled with a look from his cold black eyes, glistening with a sadness made only sharper by the determined set of his dark eyebrows. An odd breathlessness hung over the room. I do not seek your pardon, Sasuke said, his voice resonating through the silent hall. I do not deny my crimes, and, as such I am not fearful of their consequences. What I do seek is another chance to live my life, one where I am free of hatred. This is what I seek, a chance to repent. For you, Naruto. I will win my freedom, so that you can be freed, as well. Naruto stood with his feet apart, arms crossed, as he closed his eyes, the wind playfully rustling his hair. Kakashi and Yamato stood behind him in silence, waiting in anticipation. As soon as this trial is finished, I'll head out for the hidden cloud. I didn't know they'd requested my help. Naruto finally said, a slight tremor in his voice. I'll leave a clone behind to watch over Sasuke, regardless of the verdict. Can I count on you two to watch over him, as well? Kakashi and Yamato were experienced shinobi. They knew only too well what watching over him meant. If Sasuke was somehow able to avoid a death sentence, there would definitely be protests from both outside and inside the village. Even if Sasuke Uchiha was given the freedom to walk the streets of Konoha, he would be in grave danger. Make sure he isn't murdered. The silver-haired ninja sighed. Of course. You can always count on your old sensei, Naruto. Naruto simply nodded, his body rigid with stress. After a few tense minutes, he lowered himself to one knee, placing a hand upon the cold stone beneath them. I wish you were here, Dad. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. The hawk circled far overhead, crying out sharply as it suddenly veered off in the direction of the Nara forest. The ancient trees blazed red and orange as they slowly shed their leaves, falling silent in preparation for winter. Within the village, the ordinary civilians continued on with their daily lives, heedless of the silly squabbles of the ninja. This was the world Naruto wanted to share with Sasuke, a world that was dull and peaceful and beautiful. Watch over him, Dad. Repent? Tsunade parroted, leaning forward to place her chin on her laced fingers. Look at the list of your crimes, Sasuke. Your life is hardly enough to compensate for the damage that has been done. How on earth would you make amends for your actions? A low murmur passed through the members of the council and the jury. Soon after Sasuke had begun speaking, the elders had suddenly decided to excuse all non-essential individuals when they realized that Sasuke was privy to highly confidential information. The only members of the audience who were allowed to remain were those members of the Konoha 11 who were protected by the watchful clone of Naruto Uzumaki. Although the amount of chakra the clone possessed was laughably low, his eyes had the same potency as the original. Even though the clone made no move to interfere, the elders felt the piercing gazes of Naruto and his trusted judges. Sasuke turned his gaze towards the Hokage, his dark eyes unreadable. If you think about it, several of my crimes have been negated already. It is true that I went AWOL to join Orochimaru, but I was the one who defeated him in the end. And although I did, technically, join Akatsuki, I eliminated two of the most dangerous members, Deidara and Itachi Uchiha. The man who had earlier challenged Naruto, the young son of Lord Yokozawa, spoke again. Sasuke-kun, it's true that you were able to defeat 3 highly dangerous rogue ninja. None of us are denying that is an impressive feat. If the rumors are true, it seems that you also took out a troublesome gang lord, several of the Zetsu clones, and destroyed many of Orochimaru's hideouts. And yet, you existed with such malice before that this isn't enough for us to defer a death sentence. The council nodded with various levels of enthusiasm. Sasuke sighed, taking a moment to calm his spiking temper. After a moment, he lifted his head, his dark eyes going beyond the council members to return a burning blue gaze. When Naruto Uzumaki said that he stood behind everything that I said, did you realize what he was truly saying? Sasuke said, his voice becoming cold and haughty. He was giving me permission to tell you all the truth. A heavy silence fell over the room. On the balcony, 10 pairs of eyes turned towards Naruto's clone, which continued to pointedly ignore them. The truth? Shikamaru whispered. Naruto, what on earth? Listen, cut to Sasuke's cold voice. I will tell you what truly happened during the war. This is all information that Naruto and I agreed to keep secret until the time was right. Come now, boy. An elderly man blurted out, his face turning red. You cannot honestly believe that the little tale will save you from. It was not Naruto Uzumaki who defeated Kabuto, the caster of the Edo Tensei. Sasuke bit out, cutting the man off. It was my brother, Itachi, and I. After a moment of utter stillness, everyone present turned to stare at the blonde clone, who smiled meekly before nodding. You can't reprimand him for lying about it, either. Sasuke continued, drawing their attention once again. Knowing Naruto, he stayed quiet, neither confirming nor denying his involvement in that battle. If you believed it was him who defeated Kabuto, then you only have yourselves to blame for jumping to conclusions. Hey, Kiba muttered, isn't he provoking them a little here? Neji laughed coldly. Well, this is Sasuke Uchiha we're talking about. We can't expect him to behave completely. It's true that one of Naruto's clones was en route to Kabuto's location, but by the time he arrived the battle had already been decided. Sasuke continued. After that, I led Naruto to the hideout where the enemy was lurking. I helped him to defeat them, but left immediately afterwards. Correct me if I'm wrong, Naruto, but I doubt that you could have beaten him without me. No, you're right. Naruto said, jumping down from the balcony. His form wavered slightly at the impact when his sandaled feet hit the ground. We made a deal to keep Sasuke's involvement a secret because Sasuke knew that people would suspect that he was trying to win back the Leaf's favor. That's also why he vanished immediately after the war, so that there was no trace of him on the battlefields. The clone tilted his head back, closing his eyes with a sigh. If it weren't for Sasuke and his brother defeating Kabuto, there would have been a lot more casualties at the hands of the reanimated shinobi. Even our own Hokage could have become a casualty, you know? Tsunade's eyes flicked away. After a moment, her delicate eyebrows met in a frown. It's true. She muttered. All of us Cage were pretty overwhelmed trying to fight Madara. Since he had been fused with cells from the first Hokage, we might not have been able to defeat him if the jutsu hadn't been undone when it was. Naruto nodded firmly. Sasuke shook his head sharply to get the hair out of his eyes. You're forgetting something, idiot. He said, leveling Naruto with a loaded glare. I also told you where they were keeping Yamato, as well as a large reserve of Zetsu clones. Oh, I forgot about that, Naruto exclaimed, laughing. Shikaku Nara, who was serving as a member of the council, spoke for the first time. I am confused about the timeline, Naruto. The intelligence network was aware that you had made contact with Sasuke Uchiha during the war, but the encounter was so brief that it almost slipped our notice. Did that encounter occur before or after the Uchiha brothers defeated Kabuto? Sasuke frowned, ignoring his pride with tremendous effort. In defeating Kabuto, I was forced to witness my brother's death for the second time, as the jutsu was undone. I had sensed Naruto's chakra and used it as an excuse to leave the scene. So, the encounter you're referring to occurred after Kabuto was already dead. I later returned to the place where he had been defeated, and that is when I joined forces with Naruto's clone. Shikaku nodded slowly. I see. So the reason we were unable to sense you is because your chakra was diminished from your earlier battles. Not to mention, Naruto's chakra is so overwhelming it gives the sensory types headaches if they concentrate on it for too long. Naruto rubbed his nose while he smiled guiltily. The reason why we're telling you all this stuff now is because we want you to realize that it wasn't just me who won the war. If it weren't for Sasuke helping me out when he did, things would have gone a lot differently. In fact, I probably owe Sasuke my life. Idiot. Sasuke muttered, closing his eyes as he turned his face away. After a long moment of silence, the Hokage leaned forward in her seat. Sasuke, I don't know if you were aware, but Naruto has done you a tremendous favor while you were off wandering the globe. Hey, Granny, Naruto cried, a blush creeping onto his face. Tsunade ignored him, her gaze boring into Sasuke. Thanks to Naruto, the whole village is aware of what Itachi did for the sake of peace. He has not been called a traitor for a long while. Sasuke turned, his eyes wide, as he stared at the blonde. Naruto? Before Naruto could reply, the judge cut in. Enough. Sasuke Uchiha, this information is indeed interesting. I know that the village would be uncomfortable leaving such a large debt unsettled, and we undoubtedly owe you a rather large one, if this story is true. However, I am eager to hear just how you had hoped to repent for everything you have done. Yes, Sasuke replied, bowing his head. I would repent by doing exactly what I was born and trained to do, serve Konoha as a shinobi. I devoted my life to protecting the village that my brother loved so much. I must admit, Shikaku said. It seems like a waste to kill off such a capable ninja. Especially since our numbers are limited after the war. However, piped up another man with a large scar running across his face. We cannot allow him to simply wander the streets unguarded. We do not know if he can be trusted. Even though Uzumaki-sama believes in him. I agree. Tsunade said. I'm sorry, Naruto, but releasing Sasuke without penalty is out of the question. The village would protest, and, as the Hokage, I must do whatever it takes to avoid internal conflict. You understand, don't you? Of course. Naruto replied promptly. His furrowed brow, however, reveals his discontent. Tsunade sighed, turning her attention towards the silent balcony. And what do Naruto's personal jurors think? Immediately, everyone turned to Shikamaru. The young genius sensed their gazes, an irate sigh slipping from his lips like smoke as he too jumped down from the balcony. He sauntered towards Naruto, his hands in his pockets. Thanks to Naruto, the village's fighting power hasn't actually decreased at all. However, Naruto is only one guy, and if he wasn't around we'd be in a seriously troublesome situation. I calculated that, without Naruto, Konoha's fighting power is less than half of what it was a year ago. Allowing someone as powerful as Sasuke to fight with us would add some much-needed strength. Shikamaru's gaze flicked over to his father, who nodded encouragingly. However, the fact remains that it would take years for the village to trust Sasuke again, and until then he would not only be an unusable resource, but an additional burden upon us. The judge leaned forward. So, what then is your verdict, Shikamaru Nara? I know that our Lady Hokage puts great faith in your evaluations. You are quite loyal to Tsunade-sama. Shikamaru frowned, his eyes darkening from rich brown to black. You're wrong, sir. He finally reached his destination, coming to a stop beside Naruto. I'm not loyal to the Hokage, but rather, to the true king of Konoha, the future. That, of course, includes the one who will lead us in the future. His sharp gaze slid over to Naruto, whose serious expression was ruined slightly by the blush on his whiskered cheeks. He's still a bit of a loose cannon idiot, but I agree with Naruto's ideas about the future of Konoha. That's why I serve him, as my future Hokage. And since he dreams of a future where our actions are not ruled by hatred, I can reach my personal verdict quite easily. I believe that Sasuke Uchiha should be allowed his repentance. He should be allowed to serve the leaf as a shinobi. Shikamaru Naruto breathed, his eyes swimming with emotion. The genius tactician ignored him, looking towards the balcony. I can't speak for my comrades, though. Within seconds, the rest of the Konoha 11 were on their feet. Sakura stepped forward, tears glistening on her cheeks. She looked around quickly, and after receiving nods of reassurance from everyone, she raised her voice. We also stand behind Naruto as the future of Konoha. The Konoha 11 agree with Shikamaru's verdict. A low mutter passed through the jury and the council. The judge nodded. So, the future stands firmly behind their opinion. Now, the difficult part is for the past and the present to reach a verdict of their own. His eyes passed over the jury, which was composed of active jounin, and the council, which was made up of elders and their representatives. The form of Naruto's clone suddenly flickered. Damn, I'm out of chakra. He muttered, leaning over to pat Shikamaru's shoulder. I'm returning to the original. I'll leave the rest to you, you know? As soon as the clone disappeared, the real debate began. Having said everything that he deemed important, Sasuke was guided back to his cell. Shikamaru smirked as he crossed his arms, preparing himself to ride out a storm that he predicted would last for the remainder of the night. The following afternoon, Naruto was summoned to the Hokage's office. A heavy chill had settled over the village as evening approached, chasing most of the people into the warmth of their houses. Naruto's feet were as heavy as his heart as he made his way through the quiet streets, apprehensive as he wondered why Tsunade had summoned him before the official verdict from Sasuke's trial had been made. The halls of the Hokage's mansion were just as silent as the street, the lights dimmed for the evening. Naruto's heart began to race nervously as he neared a familiar door, raising his fist to knock gently. When a soft voice summoned him from within, he twisted the handle, his blue eyes immediately locking onto light brown ones. The pig-tailed Hokage managed a small smile despite the dark circles under her eyes. Close the door, Naruto, she said, her voice hoarse. She shuffled through her paperwork as Naruto did what he was asked before coming to stand before her. For a few minutes, she continued to scan the various papers and scrolls, pausing occasionally to sign or stamp something. Naruto waited patiently, sensing that her good mood was precarious at the moment. His patience was finally rewarded. We've been debating ever since your clone left yesterday afternoon, she said without looking up from her paperwork. I had to excuse myself early. I'm still a Hokage, you know. All this paperwork piles up really quickly. Maybe I should start getting you to help me with it. Naruto remained silent as Tsunade's pen continued to scratch across the paper. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple as he fought to keep himself from making a sudden outburst. Come on, tell me what's going to happen to Sasuke. By the way, Tsunade said, glancing up. We received another message from the cloud. It seems that B has managed to get that opposing faction under control for now, but they still request that you make your way there as soon as possible. Naruto frowned. I was planning to head out as soon as a verdict had been reached for Sasuke. But if they don't need me to fight, what exactly do they expect me to do there? I'm not a politician or a smooth speaker or anything, you know. It's a display of trust. The Hokage said, signing off the last scroll. Raikage plans to show you the situation firsthand, so you are fully aware of what's going on. You will probably have an opportunity to talk to one of the members of that rebelling group as well. Also, Raikage hopes to dispel any doubts that any of the people of the cloud may have by allowing them to see you for themselves. Naruto rubbed his head. I guess that makes sense. If it's a political mission like that, I definitely can't send a clone. Tsunade nodded in agreement. She reached for her tea, avoiding Naruto's unblinking gaze as she sipped it. Tension hung in the awkward silence as the minutes crawled by. Finally, Tsunade slammed down her cup, her exhaustion finally dissolving her patience. I wish I had more time to talk to you about this, Naruto. I'd prefer to have official documentation and mission objectives to hand you, but there isn't time. The final verdict will depend on your response to what I'm about to say." Naruto stepped forward, his face set seriously. "Tell me what's going on, Granny." The Hokage leaned forward, her expression just as intense. "Are you willing to accept a lifelong mission, one that will challenge your devotion to this village? If you accept this mission, you will be carrying the fate of your comrades, Naruto. Are you prepared to shoulder this burden?" Naruto's blue eyes scanned the face of his Hokage. Finally, he nodded firmly. "So be it," Tsunade said. "I will now explain your top-secret mission, Operation Moon Guardian." Inoichi Yamanaka, head of the Intel Division, rubbed at his eyes tiredly. He made his way down the silent hallway, slipping quietly into the room where a silver-haired ninja awaited him. Kakashi looked up from his book, one dark and disinterested eye the only visible part of his face. He snapped the book shut after carefully marking his page, leaning back comfortably against a frame of the open window. Behind him, the sunset burned red and orange, the light gleaming in Kakashi's pale hair. "How did it go, Inoichi?" The blonde sighed heavily as he deposited himself onto a bench, crossing his arms over his chest. "Well, everything they said appears to be true. I scoured Sasuke's mind for a good few hours, and it doesn't seem like they hide anything from us." He looked up, the fiery sunset reflected in his piercing blue eyes. After a moment of thought, he shook his head sadly. "I've been doing this job for a long time, Kakashi. And I have to say, I've never examined a mind like that of the Uchiha boys before. Every single thought was surrounded by turmoil. Such a dark and reckless mind. And yet, the boy is extremely intelligent, and by looking at his life, I can't help but feel pity for him." Kakashi averted his gaze, studying the ground before his feet. A flock of sparrows took flight from a nearby tree, spiraling as a disorganized mass before setting course for the Nara forest. Feeling the gaze of the other man on him, Kakashi peered upwards with a questioning hum. "Kakashi," Inoichi began in a low voice. "I can't help but be worried after seeing Sasuke's mind. It's true that he's forsaken his desire for revenge, but that void has been filled with a psychological dependency on Naruto that borders on obsession. The type of thing you only see in couples who have been married for 50-odd years, like he has no idea how to exist without Naruto." Much to Inoichi's confusion, the legendary Sharingan user began to laugh. A smile crinkled the corners of his eye as he shook his head slowly. "If you were to take a peek into Naruto's mind, I'm positive that you would see something similar. Sensei?" Kakashi swung his weight forward lazily, walking over to sit on the bench. He examined his gloved hands for a moment, collecting his thoughts. "Keep in mind, Inoichi, that their bond is one that transcends time and distance, one that ignores their differences. What the two of them have was strong enough to destroy every obstacle that stood in their way, including hatred. Their bond goes beyond that of comrades, and I dare say beyond friendship as well. I think that what exists between those two can be labeled as nothing other than love. Neither of them have families, and I think they have filled that void with each other." Kakashi turned to smile at the open-mouthed Yamanaka. "I'm extremely proud of my students," he said. "Honestly, I'm almost a little jealous. It must be nice to have a bond like that." Before Inoichi could reply, the sound of footsteps echoed from down the hall. They turned in unison to see Naruto and Tsunade walking side by side. Naruto had gone through another growth spurt recently, Kakashi noticed. His limbs had become rather long and elegant, and for a moment, under the glowing light of the sunset, Kakashi almost thought he was looking at his old sensei. Inoichi jumped to attention, saluting formally. "Tsunade-sama, Naruto-sama." Kakashi also rose to his feet, still staring in disbelief, as Naruto came to stand in front of him, his blue eyes level with the copy nin's. Naruto noticed his scrutiny, glancing over questioningly. "At ease, Inoichi," Tsunade said with a soft smile. "Have you finished your investigation?" "Yes, Hokage-sama," he said, glancing nervously at Naruto. "It seems that everything they claimed is true. I found no information significant enough to alter the verdict." The tension visibly drained out of Naruto's shoulders. The Hokage nodded curtly. "Excellent work, Inoichi. Let's proceed to the courtroom." They made their way down the hall with the present and future Hokage leading the way, their cloaks of deep green and fiery red flapping behind them. Kakashi and Inoichi followed at a respectful distance, their eyes tracing the back of golden-crowned heads as Tsunade and Naruto chatted in low voices. When the two guards outside the doors of the chamber saw them approaching, they turned to pull open the double doors, omitting them into a room filled with incredibly irritated people. "Whoa," Naruto whispered towards his sensei. "Talk about a bad atmosphere." Some of the elderly council members had dozed off in their chairs, while the others sipped tiredly at the tea that a guard had issued out to them. The group of jounin that made up the jury fidgeted uncomfortably, though many of them jumped to attention the moment that the Hokage entered the room. The only remaining member of the Konoha 11 was Shikamaru, sitting on the arm of the chair where Sasuke had once been. He managed to return Naruto's smile, though the bags under his eyes were visible from across the room. The judge leaned forward, straightening his cloak. "Welcome back, Tsunade-sama, Naruto-sama. I trust that you have passed on the message, Lady Hokage?" Tsunade and Naruto exchanged a quick glance. "Yes," Tsunade said with a sharp nod. The tension in the room thickened as each pair of eyes settled on the blonde Jinchuriki. Naruto stared off at nothing in particular, avoiding their intent gazes. The judge returned the nod, looking past them towards Inoichi. "Did you find anything of consequence, Inoichi-san?" The head of the Intel division stepped forward, inclining his head respectfully. "No, sir. I found no indication that their story was untrue." "I see," the judge said with a sigh of relief, leaning back in his chair. The council member with the large scar on his face jumped to his feet, slamming his hands down on the table. "I cannot accept this verdict," he yelled, his booming voice echoing in the large room. He turned towards the jury. "You are all shinobi of the leaf. Can you truly fight side by side with a murderer and be able to trust in him as a comrade? I don't care how goddamn powerful he is, Sasuke Uchiha is a treacherous murderer." Naruto ground his teeth, stepping forward. But suddenly, Kakashi's arm was spread across his chest, holding him back. "Easy, Naruto," he whispered before walking forward. "With all due respect," Kakashi said in a light, friendly tone. "Although we all justify it as being our duty, the truth of the matter is that every ninja in this room is a killer. You are simply labeling Sasuke as a murderer for your own self-gratification." With that, Kakashi smiled, raised his hand in salute, and disappeared in a puff of chakra smoke. After the sound of his cheerfulness faded into silence, Naruto snorted loudly. "Trust Kakashi-sensei to say something heavy and then vanish." He chuckled. It wasn't long before the jounin had joined in on his laughter, while the members of the council looked around in disbelief. Even Shikamaru and Tsunade couldn't help but smile. After the din had died down, the judge shook his head with an exasperated sigh. "Naruto Uzumaki." All traces of amusement left the blonde's eyes as he stepped forward, standing in the center of the room with his hands in the pockets of his black jounin pants. His unwavering blue eyes settled on the judge, his mouth set in a hard line. "What is your response to the proposed mission?" the judge asked. Everyone watched in breathless silence as Naruto switched his weight from one foot to the other, then reached up to rub at his sunshine hair. The long strands hung around his whiskered cheeks, swaying gently as he shifted his weight again. Finally, he sighed. "This is a pretty twisted mission you've given me. But I guess I can't really complain, because even if you hadn't proposed it, I would have done something similar, you know?" His gaze wandered over to Shikamaru, who nodded reassuringly. He took a deep breath, raising his voice proudly as he said, "I will accept the mission." A collective sigh breezed through the room, though they varied between sighs of relief and irritation. After a moment, the judge slammed his mallet definitively. "Very well, Naruto-sama. Consider your mission ongoing from this moment onwards. You have accepted responsibility for the actions and fate of Sasuke Uchiha, who will be of the codename Moon." A spattering of applause came from the exhausted jury, with a few members of the council, including both of the Nara men, following suit. Several of the council members, mumbling furiously, rose from their seats and stormed out of the room. Shikamaru watched them carefully, making sure he had catalogued their names and political positions before they disappeared. When the applause had died down, Naruto once again raised his voice. "If you don't mind, I have a request." He frowned, eyelids slipping shut over his troubled eyes. "Please don't tell Sasuke the verdict until everything is settled. I can tell that it will take a while to settle the conflict surrounding this trial." The silence of the empty council seats added merit to his point. The judge nodded thoughtfully. "But, Naruto-sama, as his friend, do you not think it cruel to make him wait in ignorance?" Naruto smiled sadly, his shining eyes barely visible through the fall of his bangs. "Yeah, it's really cruel," he agreed, his deep, rough voice shaking slightly. "But it isn't as cruel as giving him hope that could be taken away if there is too much protest from within the village. Not only that, but the cage from the other villages might express their concern as well. As much as I want to support Sasuke, I also have a duty to the peace between Konoha and our allies. Once everything has been settled, I will inform Sasuke myself." The jury muttered, obviously impressed. Tsunade and Shikamaru exchanged a glance, allowing themselves a moment to be proud of the result of their teachings. "Now that I think of it," Naruto muttered, oblivious to his surroundings as he devoted himself to his thoughts. "I could pass the news on to Raikage while I'm in the cloud. I'm sure he'll be the one who protests the most, but if I can get Uncle B on my side." His voice trailed off into silence while he held his chin thoughtfully. Suddenly, the blonde shook his head, stirring himself with a wide grin. "Anyways, now that everything's decided, I'll head out for the hidden cloud. I'll be leaving a clone behind to keep an eye on things here, so just let me know if anything comes up." He then looked purposefully at Shikamaru, who easily interpreted his gaze, nodding slightly to show that he understood. Reassured, Naruto smiled even wider before bowing, then turned in a flurry of red and yellow to breeze out of the room. His sudden departure left a void of cold silence. The minutes of utter stillness ticked by until Shikamaru swung himself lazily to his feet. He sighed exaggeratedly, looking over at the jury of Jounin. "Well, that's enough sitting around," he said in a bored voice. "We can't just hang around relaxing when Naruto is working so hard, can we?" "No, sir." The shinobi chorused, rising quickly from their seats and towards their neglected duties and families. Shikamaru was joined by his father, and the two of them slipped from the room as smoothly and silently as shadows. They made their way slowly to the Nara estate, the call of deer piercing through the silence of the distant forest. Shikaku slid his gaze over to his son. "You're very loyal to Naruto, Shikamaru." The younger genius sighed, shrugging in a non-committed way. "Like I've told you before, there's just something about him that makes you want to follow him." Shikamaru smiled then, his eyes tracing over the giant trees that lined their path. "And besides, our family owes him." He felt guilty that our forest was destroyed when pain attacked. That's why he meditates using the Kyuubi's chakra here, so that his life energy causes the plants to grow quickly. Shikaku returned the smile, his eyes tracing over the trees. The Nara deer called to them from the shadows, their soft eyes shining slightly in the dimming light of the sun. A comfortable silence settled as the Nara men made their way home, their breaths dancing around them like pale ghosts. "I assume we have a few days before Naruto returns from the hidden cloud," Shikamaru mused as their feet hit the garden path that led to their recently rebuilt house. Knowing Naruto, he'll be halfway to the cloud already. His father nodded, already following his train of thought. "We'll need to monitor those council members who stormed out early. I trust that you noted them all?" "Yeah," Shikamaru said, rubbing his temple. "This will be a real drag, but I think it will be best to ask Neji to assign a few black ops to each of them. I don't like being sneaky, but I can't trust those politicians." "Good idea," conceded the leader of the Nara clan. Shikaku stopped suddenly, his son quickly following suit. "I know you're tired, Shikamaru, but the sooner you contact Neji Hika the better. It's times like this when you have to take advantage of the obligation that comes with being a member of the Konoha 11. Neji is also faithful to Naruto, so let him handle the Anbu side of things." Shikamaru smirked, closing his narrow eyes. "Alright, old man, I'll cut you a deal. I'll go and talk to Neji right now if you pass on this cheerful plant at Tsunade." He cracked one eye open, watching with amusement as the color drained from his father's face. "Tomorrow, then," Shikaku said, clapping his son on the shoulder. "Tomorrow?" Shikamaru agreed with a smile. Thanks for watching my video, leave a like if you enjoyed my video and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. If you want the next part of this story, let me know in the comment box. See you next time, till then sayonara.